The barn smelled like wood rot and animal sweat. Men in dusted coats shifted on benches, boots scraping straw. A gavel dropped, sharp and final. The sheriff didn't bother clearing his throat. 3 unclaimed, 1 girl, 2 boys. Quiet types, starting at $5. No one moved. The widow stood near the back. Black gloves, black coat, hat pulled low. She didn't speak, didn't flinch, just raised one hand. The sheriff looked up. 5 to the lady. Do I hear 6? No response. He tapped again. Sold. Chatter rose, low and confused. The preacher leaned toward the banker beside him. She's not right. Ain't spoken a word since '92. And now she wants kids. The banker shook his head. Not kids. Ghosts in small shoes. The widow stepped forward. A deputy brought the children over like livestock. The girls stared straight ahead. The boys shuffled like they hadn't slept in weeks. You got papers? The deputy asked. She didn't answer, just held out a coin pouch. He counted. $10 even. She turned without another word. The children followed, quiet as fog. That night, the fire crackled soft. The wind clawed at the windows like it knew what was inside. The boys huddled near the stove, their backs touching. The girl sat apart, still in her coat, hands folded in her lap. The widow stirred the pot. Potatoes, salt, something bitter. She didn't look at them, didn't ask their names. The youngest boy sniffled. Where do we sleep? The widow pointed. Upstairs, left room. Don't touch the other door. The middle boy blinked. Why not? 'Cause I said so. The girl didn't speak. She watched the widow with eyes too old for her face. Later, they ate in silence. Tin spoons on chipped plates. The widow chewed slow. The girl didn't eat, just held the spoon. Unmoving. You'll eat or go hungry, the widow muttered. The girl blinked. This is your house. The widow didn't answer. The girl tilted her head. You always keep the kitchen knife behind the clock. The spoon dropped, loud on wood. The boys froze. The fire popped. The widow stared at her. What did you say? The girl looked down. Nothing. You said something. I said I don't like potatoes. That's not what you said. The girl set her spoon down. Why'd you leave me in the blue room, Miss Lila? The fire dimmed. The wind stopped scratching. The boys looked at each other. The widow's breath caught. Her mouth opened, closed. What blue room? She asked. The girl didn't blink. The one with the doll that cried when the window opened. The widow stood. You've never been here before. I have. You just didn't see me. That's not true. I called out. You're mistaken. You locked the door. I don't know what you're... You said be quiet, or the men would hear. The widow grabbed the edge of the table. No. The girl's voice didn't rise. You left me. I never... You did. The middle boy pushed his plate away. What's going on? The youngest whispered. She's scaring her. The girl stood. I know the hallway creaks. I know there's a bone under the 3rd stair. I know the wallpaper peels in the corner where the rain comes in. I know you kept a record book in the stove drawer. The widow backed away. Shut up. I know what you did. You don't know anything. I know my name was Ruth then. The widow turned toward the stove. Her hands shook. No, that can't be. You changed your name. I didn't. I never had a child named Ruth. You didn't keep us long enough to remember. The boys stared wide-eyed. The girl stepped forward. You paid for me then, too. Said it was safer this way. I didn't hurt you. You didn't help either. The wind returned, louder now, like it had waited its turn. The widow sat down hard, her knees bent slow. Like the weight of something years heavy had just dropped all at once. The girl leaned in. You remember the blue room now? The widow looked up. Her voice was barely there. Yes. You remember the red handle on the trapdoor? Tears welled. I never opened it. I know. You came back. I never left. The girl turned and walked toward the stairs. I'm tired. The boys followed, quiet. The widow sat in the dark long after the fire died. Wind pressed its face to the glass, and somewhere behind her, near the clock, the kitchen knife shifted. The girl didn't speak much the next morning, just pointed to where the flour was. Before the widow could reach for the tin, said the matches were in the drawer near the broken hinge, though no one had told her. She peeled potatoes at the table without needing to be asked, placed the pot on the stove before it even started to boil. The boys laughed, fought over bread crusts, and knocked over a stool. The widow didn't yell. She just watched the girl. At noon, the girl stood in the hallway and pressed her hand to the third panel from the left. "There's paper inside," she said. The widow's voice was low. "What kind of paper?" "Folded, burnt edges." "You saw it." "I felt it." The widow didn't move. The girl turned. "You don't want me to look, do you?" "No, I won't." The boys ran past, chasing something invisible. The girl didn't flinch. She just moved aside, like she'd always known how wide the hallway was. That night, the girl lit the fire before the widow got to it. She didn't ask where the wood was kept. She stacked it right. 2 thick pieces at the bottom, smaller twigs like teeth across the top. It lit fast, like it knew her too. The widow stirred stew. She didn't turn. "You learned that somewhere." The girl shrugged. "Here. You've never been here." "I have." The widow said nothing. The girl hummed, soft and slow. A song the widow hadn't heard in years, one her mother used to hum while sewing, a tune that always slowed when someone died. "Where'd you hear that?" the widow asked. "In the walls," the girl said. The widow gripped the spoon tighter. "Stop." "I like it." "I said stop." The girl did. The next day, the widow found her standing at the attic hatch, arms crossed. "How'd you know that was there?" The girl looked up. "You used to keep the lockbox up there." "What lockbox?" "The one with the blue ribbon and the brass key. The one with the list." The widow went pale. "What list?" The girl didn't answer, just turned, walked downstairs, and didn't mention it again. The boys ran through the garden, their shoes muddy and loud. One slipped, laughed. The other helped him up. The widow didn't stop them. Let them be loud. Let them bruise. That night, she sat by the stove long after the kids had gone to bed. Her hands trembled near the flame. She didn't want to go upstairs, not while that girl slept in the same hallway. She poured a shot of brown from the back cabinet, swallowed it whole. Her throat burned. Not enough. Footsteps creaked above her, soft, even. She looked up, listened. They stopped at the attic. She stood, slow, climbed. The hatch was cracked open. She hadn't left it that way. She pulled it back, stared into the dark, empty, except the ribbon, blue, just inside. She didn't touch it. The next morning, the girl was already at the stove. "I didn't go inside," she said. The widow stared at her. "Then how'd the ribbon get there?" The girl stirred the oats. "It wanted to be seen." "What did?" "You know." The widow walked out. The boys didn't ask questions. They never did. But they were quiet now, watching her more, whispering to each other. That evening, the girl asked where the well was. "There's no well," the widow said. The girl nodded. "Used to be." The widow's face hardened. "You don't talk about things you don't understand." "I do understand." "No, you don't." The girl stood. "It's still there, just covered. Go to bed." The girl didn't move. The widow snapped, louder now. "Go." The girl left. The widow sat back down, breathing hard. The fire burned too high. The boys tiptoed upstairs, silent. The house creaked like it knew it was being watched. That night, the widow dreamed of the blue room again. The wallpaper peeling in the corner, a girl's shoe under the bed, a quiet thump behind the door. But it wasn't Ruth this time. It was her, Lila, locked inside, screaming without sound, waiting for someone who never came. She woke up cold, wet at the neck. The fire was out. The girl was standing by the stairwell, holding the poker. "I heard something," she said. The widow sat up. "What?" "It said my name." The widow stood. "Who did?" "The house." The widow walked past her, grabbed the poker, shoved it back into its stand. "You're dreaming." "I'm not." "You're lying." "I never do." "You're not supposed to know what you know." "I didn't ask to remember." The widow leaned close, eyes narrowed. "Then forget." The girl didn't blink. "You didn't." The widow turned away, walked to the window, watched the black outside. The trees didn't move. The wind had stopped. She whispered, more to herself. "I tried to." The girl stepped back into the shadows. The house held its breath. The knock came hard. 2 beats, then 3. Too sure for a stranger. Too lazy for the law. The widow didn't move at first, just stared at the door, hand still in the sink. The water had gone cold. Another knock. Then a voice. "Lila, I know you're in there." She dried her hands slow, walked to the door, cracked it an inch. Marlin stood there, older now, grayer, slumped from whiskey, but still mean in the eyes. He hadn't shaved. His coat hung loose over bones and guilt. "You got company," he said. The widow said nothing. He looked past her, toward the hallway. "3 of them? 2 boys and a girl." Marlin sniffed. "Not talking about the boys." She opened the door wider. "You drunk, Marlin?" "I remember her face," he said. "You do too. Get off my porch. That ain't your child. You don't know what you're saying. I helped you dig the hole behind the church. Remember that? You should leave. She ain't just some girl. She's none of your business." He stepped forward. "That's her, Lila. That's the one you left." The rifle came off the mantel without a sound. She held it clean, practiced, not raised, not aimed, just ready. Marlin stopped mid-step. "I ain't here to fight," he said. "No, you're here to remember. You ever think maybe she came back to finish what we started? Get off my land. She's not normal." "Neither are we." He opened his mouth again. She pulled the hammer back. He stepped down, backed up, stumbled a bit. "She says your name. You shoot her too?" he called. She didn't answer. He shook his head. "Whole damn town's rotten. Thought you were better." She shut the door, locked it, put the rifle back like it lived there. The girl was watching from the stairs. No sound, just that stare, like she'd heard it all before. The widow sat by the stove, waiting for night. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The boys wrestled upstairs, feet pounding floorboards. She didn't tell them to stop. When the cabin finally went quiet, she stood, lit 1 candle, found the girl in the hallway, standing barefoot. "You sleepin'?" "No." "You ever seen a barn with a red door?" The girl didn't blink. "Yes." The widow leaned closer. "Do you remember it?" "Yes." "What happened under it?" "I was told to wait." The widow's breath caught. "For what?" "A shovel." The candle flickered. The girl kept talking. "It was cold. Not outside. Inside. Like something underneath knew I'd be there. You were never— I was always there." The widow's voice cracked. "You shouldn't know that." The girl took a step closer. "But I do. You were a baby. You don't remember that." "I wasn't a baby. You were small. I'm still small. You were gone. That's all I remember. You left me there. You don't know that." "I know the earth was wet." The widow sat on the steps. Her knees gave out like the weight of that year returned all at once. "I didn't want it to happen," she whispered. The girl sat beside her. "But you let it." "I didn't have power. You had choice." The candle sputtered. The hallway went dim. "I was scared." "So was I." "I thought you died." "I did." The widow looked up. "Then how are you here?" "I don't know." They sat in silence. The wind whistled through the cracks in the frame. The house moaned somewhere in the walls. The widow stood, walked to the mantel, took the rifle down again, not to aim it, just to hold it. "Would you hurt me?" the girl asked. "I already did." "That's not what I meant." The widow turned. "I don't know. You're afraid of me. I'm afraid of what you remember. I'm not here to punish you." "Then what?" "I don't know." The boys came down the stairs, one rubbing his eyes, the other holding a blanket. They stopped when they saw the rifle. The younger one asked, "Are we leaving?" "No." The widow said. The older one looked at the girl. "Did you do something?" "No," she said. "I just remember too much." The widow lowered the gun, set it on the table, sat down. "No one's going anywhere," she said. The boys went back upstairs. The girl stayed, watching the fire fade. "I saw a red cloth in your drawer," she said. "What about it?" "It was part of my dress." "You don't know that." "I do." The widow closed her eyes. "Then what do you want from me?" "Truth." "And after?" "Don't know yet." They sat there, quiet, while the fire burned itself out. The girl didn't move. The widow didn't cry. Neither one said a thing when the first floorboard groaned in the wall. like something shifting deeper than wood, something finally listening. The widow hadn't opened the box in 15 years. It lived under the loose floorboard in the back pantry, where flour sacks used to be, where spiders made their homes now. She pulled it out slow, dust curling in the candlelight. It was smaller than she remembered, or maybe her hands had just grown with guilt. She set it on the kitchen table, unlatched the rusted clasp. Inside, the letters were still folded neat, clean edges, yellowed corners, all addressed, all stamped, all unsent. Not a single one torn. Governor's office, sheriff's wife, Bishop Coates, all of them written with the same trembling hand, some in ink, some in pencil, some with blood-stained fingerprints where the pen slipped. The words bled hope back then. Please, not accusations. Not yet. She read one, then another. Her own voice sounded foreign in her head. They keep the smaller ones underground behind the furnace. The priest said God would sort them later. I think they're hiding the deaths in the crop reports. Each one ended the same. Please help us. Please help them. Please help me. She remembered licking the stamps, never mailing a single one. By the time the candle had burned down to a stub, the box sat open like a wound, and she hadn't moved in hours. The wind outside had died, but something in the house had started breathing again. She didn't hear the girl come in, didn't see her until she spoke. You wrote all those. The widow jumped. It's late. I know. You should be in bed. I was. The girl stepped closer, eyes on the box. Who were they for? The widow covered the top of the stack. No one. The girl didn't blink. Then why are they addressed? They were never sent. Why not? Didn't see the point. You did when you wrote them. That was before. Before what? The widow looked up. Before I knew they wouldn't care. The girl reached forward slow, took one from the pile, opened it like it was something sacred. Her voice was soft, steady. To the sheriff's wife, I heard screaming from the chapel basement again. Please tell your husband. Please make him stop. Please tell me I'm not the only one hearing it. She laid it on the table. She read another. To the governor, I am afraid to speak in town. They say the new children are blessings. But I've seen their hands. They shake like old men. They don't remember their names. After 2 weeks, I think something's wrong with the water. Another letter down. Then another. To the bishop, why does the choir have no boys anymore? Why do the girls sing without faces now? Why do they keep digging graves behind the dormitory? I buried one myself. I didn't know her name. She had red hair. Please send help. The widow covered her mouth. That's enough. You kept all of them. I said that's enough. You wanted someone to stop it. I tried. Then why didn't you leave? The widow froze. The girl stared at her, calm. You begged them to help. Why didn't you save yourself? The widow's hand trembled as she reached for the last letter, the one she never signed. She unfolded it. I wrote this the day they locked the south wing. She whispered. Who was it for? Myself. She read aloud, barely a whisper. Lila, if you're still breathing, remember, they'll keep going as long as you keep watching. The fence is only a fence until you cross it, and silence is only safe until it swallows you. The girl leaned in. You didn't leave. I couldn't. Why? They had my sister's boy. They said if I left, he'd disappear next. Did he? They buried him anyway. Said he fell in the silo. The girl picked up the unsigned letter. You never meant to mail this. No. Then why keep it? The widow's voice cracked. Because I needed to know I once wanted to leave. The room went quiet. The girl folded the page again, set it gently in front of her. You waited for permission, she said. The widow nodded. And it never came. No. The girl stood, looked around the kitchen like she'd never seen it before. This house remembers, she said. I know. Not just what you did, what you didn't. I know. The girl walked to the door. Where are you going? Nowhere. Then why stand like that? Because I'm remembering. What? How cold the basement was. The widow dropped her head. The girl turned back to the table, placed her palm flat over the box. You kept them alive, she said. No, the widow whispered. I buried them with ink. The girl didn't reply. She walked out. The candle hissed out, and the house breathed slower. They arrived just as the bell rang. The widow in her pressed black, the girl in a dress too short for her knees, the boys scrubbed but wild in the eyes. Every head turned. One man muttered something under his breath. His wife elbowed him. The church was old, stiff-backed pews, and a ceiling that moaned in the heat. Dust danced through the windows like it had nowhere else to go. The choir sat quiet, fanning themselves with bent hymnals. The pianist coughed once and played the opening chord. The widow guided the children to the second pew. She hadn't been back in years, not since before the barn fire, not since they stopped asking where the girls were. The girl didn't sit. She stood in the aisle, hands folded. When the hymn began, she opened her mouth and sang. The note came clean, high, too high for a child, too strong for one so pale. It cut through the church like wind through cracked wood. The pianist missed a chord. The sopranos fell off. But the girl kept singing, her voice steady, ancient somehow, like it didn't belong to her. By the second verse, no one else was singing. The pastor looked down at his book, blinked twice, closed it. "Amen," he said. Too early. The room stayed silent. The girl sat. He started the sermon, a passage about mercy and old debts, about healing from within, but the words came wrong, twisted. He stumbled once, then again. Behind him, the window cast a warped light on the altar. The dust turned gold, then gray. The girl didn't look at him. The widow never blinked. After the final blessing, as the pianist avoided the closing chords, the pastor stepped off the pulpit. His steps were sharp, angry. He moved straight toward the widow before the last amen left the room. She saw him coming and stood. He grabbed her wrist. "That girl is not what she seems," he hissed. She didn't pull back. She leaned in close, voice low. "Neither was your brother," she said, "or the girls under his house." He froze. She stepped past him. The children followed, quiet as smoke. He turned, watching her walk away, mouth slack. His fingers shook where they had touched her. That evening, the widow made cornbread. The boys argued over who got the end piece. The girl sat by the window, humming the hymn again, softer now, like it was sinking back into her. The widow stirred the pot. Her hand wouldn't stop twitching. "You remember what you said to him?" the girl asked. The widow didn't turn. "I do." He was scared. Good. People will ask questions now. They should have asked sooner. The girl looked down. "The ones under the house. You knew their names." The widow nodded. "I was one of the few who did." "Then why didn't you tell?" "I wrote letters, but never spoke. They would have buried me with them." The girl didn't argue. That night, the boys slept deep, curled like puppies under patched quilts. The widow sat in her rocker by the fire. The girl stood by the window, watching the road. "You waiting for someone?" the widow asked. "No." "Then what?" "I think something's about to end." "You always talk like that." "Only when it's true." The widow looked at the fire. "He'll come." "He won't. He's a coward. He's not coming." The girl was right, but the smoke came anyway, just past midnight. The glow lit up the hills behind the chapel. Not a large fire, not a barn or a field, just one room, contained, hot, intentional, the pastor's study. The town woke to it. Buckets passed, voices called, but the fire didn't spread. It ate only the inside. The outer walls stood untouched. The books inside, the records, the ledgers, the photos, gone. The pastor sat in the dirt out front, hands in his lap, staring at the flames like they were speaking directly to him. He didn't cry, didn't shout, just watched. The sheriff came before dawn, said it looked like bad wiring, said the pastor had no comment, said the door had been unlocked from the inside, said the safe was empty. By breakfast, the town knew everything and nothing. By supper, no one mentioned it. The next Sunday, the widow didn't go back. The girl didn't ask why. The sheriff came instead, knocked at the cabin door, hat in his hands. "I heard she sang," he said. "She did," the widow replied. "I heard it made the old folks shake." Then they remembered something. "I heard she looked just like the ones who vanished." "Maybe they never vanished," the sheriff nodded. "You believe in ghosts?" "I believe in memory." He looked past her, into the cabin. "May I come in?" "No." He waited. She waited longer. Finally, he tipped his hat, walked off. The girl stepped out from behind the curtain. He doesn't know yet. He will. When? When someone else speaks. Who? Doesn't matter. The girl walked over to the fireplace, picked up a splinter of charred wood, turned it in her fingers. It burned fast, she said. Truth usually does. The widow replied. The boys shouted from the garden. A fight over turnips. One had a bloody lip. The widow went to them. The girl stayed at the hearth. She didn't hum this time, just listened. The house was quieter now, but not empty. It held things again. Old things. Secrets pulled from the walls, dragged into light. And, somewhere under the ashes, the pastor still sat with his silence, blinking slow, remembering what the hymn sounded like in her voice, and what his brother used to say when no one else was around. It started as a game. The boys called it tunneling, said they were building a fort underground like soldiers used to, like the kind the older one read about in a war book that smelled like mildew and old fear. The widow let them. The soil back there was soft, overgrown with weeds that didn't mind being stepped on. They dug with old spades, their hands caked in rust-brown dirt, their knees torn from denim. The girl sat on the porch, watching. Midday sun burned high. The widow was canning peaches in the kitchen, humming low, tired from a sleepless night. She didn't notice the silence right away. It settled slow, like a bad thought. Then the screen door creaked. The younger boy stood there, dirt on his cheeks, holding something small in his hand. The widow dried her hands. What is it? He opened his palm. A brass buckle dull with time, the kind you'd find on a child's worn shoe. Too small for either of them. Too perfect to belong in the weeds. Where'd you get that? He didn't answer. She stepped forward. Show me. They walked to the pasture. The hole wasn't deep, maybe knee-height, shallow enough to be careless, deep enough to reach what wasn't meant to be reached. Inside the hole, next to a pile of turned earth, was a button. Off-white, porcelain, handmade. She knelt, picked it up. It hummed in her fingers. The boys stood quiet. The older one wiped sweat from his forehead. The little one kept shifting his weight, like he'd done something bad, but couldn't name it. You were supposed to stay near the stump, the widow said. The older one pointed. We started there, but he said dig closer to the trees. The widow turned to the younger boy. Who told you to do that? He looked down. Answer me. He lifted his arm and pointed toward the porch. The girl sat there, still watching, not blinking. Her dress swayed in the wind, even though the air had stopped moving. The widow stood, walked fast toward her, didn't speak until she was close enough to see the dirt under the girl's fingernails. You told them to dig. The girl tilted her head. No. Don't lie. I didn't tell them. Then how'd they know? The girl looked past her, toward the pasture. Sometimes the ground remembers louder than I do. The widow's breath caught. That buckle, it belonged to Ruth. The girl didn't smile, didn't frown, just watched. I buried it, the widow said. I know. No one else knew where. The girl didn't answer. The widow's voice dropped. Why now? Because they were listening. To you. To the dirt. The widow stepped back. Her hands trembled. You're not right. No. You're not supposed to be here. I didn't leave. The widow turned away, walked back into the cabin, pulled down the old coat from the wall, laced her boots, took her rifle not to use, just to carry. She told the boys to stay inside, told the girl nothing, and then she walked into the woods. The trees swallowed her by the second bend. She didn't look back. The girl watched until she was gone. The boys sat at the table. The older one peeled an apple with a knife he wasn't supposed to have. The younger stared at the buckle like it might start whispering. The girl stayed quiet, didn't move, just listened. In the woods, the widow walked until her legs burned, until the air changed, until the smell of cedar gave way to something older, something dry and iron-rich. She found the clearing, the one she used to come to when she was too full of noise. She sat on the old log, laid the rifle across her knees. The trees didn't move. The wind held its breath. She remembered the hole behind the chapel. The shovel in her hands. The preacher's brother saying, "You do it. She trusts you." The way Ruth's hand went cold too fast. She buried the buckle herself, pressed it into the dirt like a memory she didn't want, covered it in silence. And now it had come back. She stayed in the woods until the sun bowed low. When she returned, the cabin was quiet. The girl was sitting by the fire. The boys were asleep, arms tangled together. The widow set the rifle down, hung the coat back on its nail. The girl didn't look up. "I found her buckle once before," the widow said. "Didn't know what to do with it. Why bury it? Didn't feel right to keep. And now?" The widow walked to the fire, sat across from her. "I think I need to remember what else I buried." The girl's voice was soft. "It's not just Ruth down there." "I know." The fire cracked, one long, dry pop. The widow stared into it. "I never asked your name," she said. The girl blinked. "You used to know it. I want to hear it from you." The girl hesitated. Then, "Annie." The widow closed her eyes. That name hadn't passed her lips in 2 decades. "I had a sister named Annie." "I know. She disappeared before the papers came." "Before the others." "I remember her singing," the girl whispered. "She used to braid my hair. She used to sneak sugar from the kitchen and say it was flour." The widow smiled. It hurt. "I couldn't save her either." The girl looked at her. "You still can." "How?" The girl stood, walked to the mantel, picked up the old ledger, the one with names, ages. One page half torn, the ink smudged. She opened it. "I'm on the last page," she said. The widow walked over, looked at the name, faded but real. Annie K. I scratched the rest of it out. "Why?" "Because I wanted to see if you'd remember." The widow traced the letters. "I remember." The girl set the book down. "You should dig deeper." "Why?" "To find the rest of me." The widow turned. "You're standing right here." The girl's eyes didn't change. "Not all of me." They stood in silence. Outside, the dirt shifted in the pasture, quiet, like breath in a throat, waiting to speak. The girl traced the letters in the stone with her finger, slow and steady, like she was reading them in another language. The well sat half swallowed in ivy, crooked and dry now, but the carved name still showed clear beneath the moss. 4 letters, worn by weather, but still there, not hidden, not erased. The girl didn't speak for a long time. The widow watched from the porch, arms folded, eyes sharp. She hadn't meant for them to find it, hadn't stepped near the well in years. The boys never noticed it, but the girl always saw what others skipped. When the girl finally came inside, she stopped at the door, dirt on her hem, stone dust on her fingers. "What's the name on the well mean?" The widow didn't flinch. "It was a cousin. Died young." The girl stared at her. "That's a lie." "It's what I was told." "You carved it." The widow's mouth tightened. "You don't know that." "I do." The widow turned back to the stove, ladled broth into chipped bowls. "Eat before it goes cold." The girl didn't move. "It's your name, isn't it?" The widow's hand froze. The girl stepped closer. "The one you had before you were Lila." "You're mistaken. It wasn't carved deep. You were scared someone would see." "It's just a rock." "No, it's the first place you ever told the truth." The boys ran in from the pasture, boots slamming wood, laughing about worms. The widow set the bowls down, wiped her hands on a cloth, sat. The girl took her bowl but didn't eat. She watched the spoon steam. "I saw it somewhere else," she said. "The name." The widow didn't ask where. "Under the desk, schoolhouse corner room, back when they let the girls write on the wood." The widow's eyes lifted, slow. "You were never there." "I was. I watched from the hall." "There weren't windows in the hall." "I didn't need windows." The boys talked over each other about a bird they saw, red and loud. The girl didn't break her gaze. "What name did you see?" the widow asked. "Callahan." The spoon in her hand dropped into the bowl. "Mrs. Callahan," the girl added. The widow stared at the wall behind her. "I haven't heard that name in a long time." The girl spoke gently. "It wasn't Lila then?" "No." "Why'd you change it?" The widow stood, walked to the sink, turned on the tap though nothing came out, just the noise of metal. "I needed to." "Why?" "Because she died." "Mrs. Callahan?" "Yes." "Who killed her?" The widow's shoulders dropped. "Me." The room went quiet. Even the boys stopped talking. The girl stood, walked to the table's edge, her voice low, careful. "I remember that name." "You would have been too young." "No, I remember hearing it. Where? From your mouth. The day they pulled me away. You said it under your breath, like a prayer. The widow shook her head. I never. You did. You said, don't let them take her, Mrs. Callahan. Like you weren't yourself anymore. The wind outside pushed hard against the window frame. I don't remember, the widow whispered. But I do. The girl stepped closer. You weren't always the one who watched. Once, you tried. The widow turned slowly. Her voice cracked. They threatened to burn down the whole school if I didn't give up the list. I kept yours off it. You kept mine. I couldn't keep you. The girl tilted her head. You changed your name to forget? No, I changed it to survive. Same thing. The boys started clearing their bowls, uneasy. They could feel it now, the shift in the air, the way the room didn't want them there. The widow sat again, her voice low. You were never supposed to come back. I didn't. You're standing here, but not all of me. The girl touched the wooden table. Her fingers found an old scratch mark in the corner, almost erased by time. Did you know they made us scratch names off the table before we left the school? She asked. The widow didn't answer. We used dull blades, hurt more than it helped. Yours took the longest to fade. I thought they burned that building. Some things don't burn. The fire crackled in the hearth. The widow's hands shook. What do you want from me? She asked. The girl looked down. Not revenge. Then what? Truth. The widow stood again. I don't have any left. The girl turned toward the door. Then come see the well again. Why? Because I remember what you buried near it. The widow froze. She hadn't spoken of the well in 20 years, hadn't let herself remember what lay beneath it. She followed the girl out into the dusk. The grass crunched beneath their boots. The wind had died. The sky was all gray and low, like it was pressing down. The well stood crooked, stones loose, rope long gone. The girl pointed. There. Under that corner. The widow knelt, dug with her bare hands. Not far beneath, her fingers hit wood. A small box, metal latch, rusted but intact. She lifted it out, opened it. Inside, a locket, a dried rose, and a folded slip of paper. She read the name, Annie Ruth Callahan. The girl stared at her. You wrote that. The widow sat back. It was for her. The girl nodded. She never got it. I know. You kept the name alive. No, the widow said, voice shaking. I buried it, just like I buried everything else. The girl's eyes filled with something too old for her face. But I found it. The widow looked down at the name again. Her old name, the one she gave up after they came for the girls, the one she'd stopped saying in mirrors. She was never a cousin, the girl said. No. She was your sister. Yes. The girl knelt beside her. She's still under there, isn't she? The widow nodded. Just bones now. The girl whispered, then dig again. The wind picked up. The trees groaned like they remembered too. The widow pressed her palms to the earth. I will, she said. And for the first time in years, she meant it. The girl stood over the well at first light, barefoot, nightgown soaked at the hem with dew. Her hands gripped the moss-crusted stone. Blood streaked her knuckles where the lid had torn skin. She didn't cry, just kept pulling, kept whispering under her breath like the stones could hear her. The widow saw her from the window and dropped the kettle. She was out the door before it hit the floor. Stop that, she shouted, voice sharp enough to cut air. The girl didn't move, just looked up calm, palms still pressed to the warped wood of the well cover. Your hands, the widow said. I know. You'll get lockjaw. I won't. You think there's something down there? I don't think, the girl said softly. I remember. The widow stepped closer. The sour smell hit her all at once, metallic and thick. She gagged. The girl didn't. Why does it smell like rust and milk? The girl asked. The widow froze. That was the smell of the basement in the schoolhouse. The one with no light. The one they made her clean. The one they made her forget. Stop pulling at it, the widow said again, but her voice was weaker now. It's not just a well, the girl said. Then what is it? It's where the sounds went when no one listened. The girl let go. Blood smeared across the stone lip like a signature. You'll infect yourself, the widow whispered. I already did. She walked back to the house without looking back. The boys were pale by afternoon, sweat beading their foreheads, bodies trembling beneath their blankets. They didn't eat, didn't speak, just stared, eyes fluttering like leaves in wind. The widow pressed cloth to their skin, whispered old prayers she didn't believe in, soaked the towels in vinegar. The girl stood at the door and watched. "You sick?" the widow asked. "No." "You touched the same dirt they did." "I didn't touch what they touched." "They dug in it." "I listened to it." The widow looked back at the boys. One was murmuring in sleep. No words. Just a high whimper, like a hurt pup. "What's wrong with them?" The girl leaned her head against the doorframe. "They woke something." "In the well. In the earth around it." The widow stood, wiped her hands on her apron. "There's nothing buried out there but old wood and shame." "That's not true. They're just boys. They didn't know." "That doesn't matter." "Then what does?" "Memory." The widow's voice cracked. "You think memory makes people sick?" "I think forgetting does." The boys cried out together, then stilled. Too still. The widow rushed back, checked their pulses. Still there, still warm, but fading. She fed them broth by the teaspoon, rubbed mint on their gums. The girl stood by the fire. "Do you know what this is?" the widow asked. The girl nodded. "The same sickness the girls used to get." The widow looked up. "You remember that?" "I remember being fine, then not, like something climbed inside. I thought it was fever." "It was memory." "That's not possible. I remember the milk they made us drink. Said it was blessed." "It wasn't. It made us forget, for a while. Then it burned." The widow sank to the floor. "I brought it back here, all of it." "No. It never left." That night, the widow sat in the kitchen alone. The fire was out. The air tasted wrong. The house creaked, not with weather, but with something moving beneath the floorboards. She pressed her palms flat to the planks. Still warm. She didn't sleep. But when she closed her eyes, the orphanage came back anyway. She was back in the hallway, linoleum slick from mop water. Her shoes didn't squeak. She was barefoot. There were no voices, just the sound of breathing. She walked to the door at the end, the locked one. She knocked. No answer. She reached for the knob, but her hands didn't work. Then the door opened. And she was inside, except she wasn't. She was watching herself. On the other side of the glass, the children were there, eyes wide, lips pale, hands twitching like sleepwalkers. She didn't speak, just watched, didn't move, didn't help, didn't scream, only watched. She woke with a cry stuck in her throat. The girl was beside her. "You saw it?" she asked. The widow couldn't speak. "You saw you?" The widow nodded. The girl sat beside her on the cold floor. "I see her all the time," she said. "The version of me that never got out, the one still locked in that basement." "She didn't scream either," the widow whispered. "No." "Why?" "She was waiting for you." The widow looked down. Her palms were red with heat. Her body felt like it had been crawling through memory. "You said the well isn't just a well," she said. The girl nodded. "What is it?" "It's a door." "To what?" Everywhere we were silent. The widow shut her eyes. The girl stood. "I want to open it." "You can't." "I have to." "You'll let something out." "I already did." The widow stood slowly. Her knees ached. Her back screamed. "Then let me help." The girl stared at her for a long time. "You were the first person who saw me," she said. "But you didn't look long." "I was afraid." "So was I." They walked out together, back to the well. The sun hadn't risen yet. The grass steamed under the pale light of early morning. The girl put her hands back on the lid. The widow placed hers on top of the girl's. Together they pulled. The lid groaned, and something underneath took a deep, ragged breath. The barn had always leaned a little left, the kind of tilt people stopped noticing after enough years passed. Boards warped from heat and guilt. Nails rusted. The back half hadn't held animals in decades. Just silence, dust, and the weight of things unspoken. The widow waited until the children were asleep. The boys still fevered, still twitching in their dreams. The girl quiet in her bed, or pretending to be. She lit the lantern and went out alone. The door stuck like always. She kicked it once at the base, and it gave. Inside, the air was thick, not with dirt, with memory. the kind that stuck in your lungs and didn't let go. She moved past the empty troughs, past the wall with the broken harness still nailed above it, until she reached the far corner. She stopped, pressed her palm flat against the wood. It took 3 breaths. Then she knocked once. Soft, hollow. The false panel opened just like it used to. Inside, darkness. She lifted the lantern and stepped in. The room was small, musty, cold. A shelf to the left. A chair with no legs. And the ledger, still wrapped in burlap, tucked beneath the floorboard, marked with a crack. She pulled it out. Her hands shook. The cover was soft from age, edges curled like dead leaves. She opened it. Columns, names, ages, checkmarks, notes. Surrendered. Relocated. Withdrawn. Rows of dates in a careful, trembling hand. Her hand. She turned each page slowly, like it might bleed. Then she found it. The last full page, half torn but enough left to see. One line near the bottom. ARC. Age 7. Surrendered. Unclaimed. She closed the book fast. The initials hit harder than the full name would have. She knew what they meant. She dropped the ledger. It thudded against the dirt. Behind her, rope hung from the wall, cleaned, coiled, tied with care. The same kind they used in the quiet room. She hadn't touched it in 20 years. But someone had. Someone kept it ready. She turned, reaching for the lantern again, and saw her. The girl stood in the doorway, barefoot, silent. "You found it," the girl said. The widow stepped back. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Yes, you did." The widow's voice cracked. "I didn't remember." "You remembered enough to hide it." The girl stepped forward, slowly. Her shadow swallowed the ledger. "You wrote me down before you knew me," she said. The widow shook her head. "I was told to keep records, that's all." "You didn't keep all of them." "No, you gave me to them." The widow backed into the wall. "I didn't mean to." "You did." The lantern flickered. The girl looked down at the rope. "You used that?" The widow covered her mouth. "Only when they made me." The girl didn't move, didn't cry, just looked at it. "You kept it clean." "I forgot it was there." "No," she said. "You were hoping you wouldn't need it again." "I was hoping I'd never see it again." The girl crouched and picked up the ledger. She held it like a mirror. "Did you think if you buried it, it'd stop being true?" The widow nodded. "Yes. It doesn't work that way." The barn creaked overhead. Wind cut through the cracks in the slats. The widow stepped forward, reached for the book. "Let me see it again." The girl pulled it back. "You already wrote it once." The widow knelt. "I want to tear the page." The girl stared at her. "It's too late for that. I want to make it right." "You can't." "I'll try." The girl didn't hand her the ledger. She turned and walked away, out of the barn, into the dark. The widow sat alone, with the rope, and the names, and all the pages that never burned. The widow woke choking on smoke, not thick, not black, not yet, but sharp, curling into her lungs like it had a reason. The fire in the hearth had died hours ago. The coals were cold. This smoke smelled different, sour, earthy, like something old burning too slow to die. She rose fast, heart hammering, and stumbled toward the center of the house. The rug was lifting at the corners, soft threads darkened with heat. Smoke leaked from beneath it in thin gray fingers. Her hand flew to her mouth. The trap door. She hadn't spoken of it in 20 years, hadn't told the boys, hadn't even whispered it to the girl. She thought it was sealed for good. Nailed shut, forgotten. She knelt, coughing, yanked the rug back. The floor beneath pulsed with warmth. A low red glow pulsed from the seams in the wood, like breath through teeth. The boards weren't just warm, they were alive. The widow stood and backed away, staggering into the chair by the stove. Her eyes stung. "Boys," she called. No answer. She turned toward the hallway just as the front door creaked open behind her. The girl stood outside, barefoot in the cold white nightshirt, glowing faint in the dark. Smoke curled past her shoulders. The widow moved toward her. "Where are the boys?" "They're fine," the girl said. "They're with the silence." "What silence?" "The kind that waits until someone finally listens." The widow's voice caught. "Did you light something?" The girl shook her head. "I didn't need to." The widow looked down. Smoke was seeping now from the baseboards too, drifting up the walls, tracing the nails. "You knew," she whispered. The girl stepped off the porch. "It wanted you to remember." "What did?" The girl didn't answer. "Tell me." The girl looked up at her, calm, steady. "The house," she said. "The one beneath this one. There's no house beneath this house." There was. The widow swallowed hard. Her throat burned. "I buried it." The girl nodded, and it stayed quiet. Until now. The widow stepped outside, letting the door swing behind her. The night air hit her like cold water. She looked back at the cabin. The windows fogged from inside, orange light pulsing from the floor. The fire wasn't spreading, not to the walls, not to the ceiling, just breathing from underneath. Slow, measured, like it wanted her to watch. "I tried to forget," the widow said. The girl didn't look at her. "You did." "I locked the trapdoor, and it stayed locked. Until you." The girl turned then. Her eyes weren't cruel, just tired. "It wanted you to remember," she said again. "Now it doesn't need you anymore." The widow turned back to the cabin. Heat shimmered in the windows now, but the house wasn't burning. It was exhaling, letting something out. She whispered, "What happens next?" But the girl had already turned and walked into the dark. By morning, the house had cooled. Nothing left but the frame and the stone chimney, blackened but standing, like it wanted to remember. The floor had caved in, but the fire never touched the roof. It had burned from underneath, clean, quiet, exact, like it had chosen what it needed and nothing more. By noon, the town arrived, not all at once, in trucks, on foot. Some with binoculars, others with folded arms and questions they didn't ask out loud. They stood at the fence line, whispering. Nobody crossed it, not until the sheriff's son showed up. New hat, clean badge, gun he never unbuckled. He parked his truck beside the burnt porch and stepped out like he'd done this before, like he was used to ash and accusations. The widow stood by what used to be the well, arms crossed, boots firm in the soil. The girl beside her. The boys behind them, coughing soft, but standing. The sheriff's son looked at the ruin and whistled low. "Hell of a mess," he said. The widow didn't answer. He turned to her. "You got someone who can take them in?" The widow looked down. "No." "Then they come with me." The girl stepped forward. "You wear his badge," she said, calm. The man blinked. "Whose?" "Your father's." He smirked. "It's mine now." "No." The girl said, "You just borrowed it." The smirk faded. "You walk like him, too," she added. "Stiff, like something stuck in your ribs." The sheriff shifted his stance. "Miss, I'm just doing my job." "No, you're doing his job, but you don't know what it cost." "I don't need to know." "That's how it starts." He looked to the widow. "Is she always like this?" The widow didn't speak. The girl stepped closer. "You ever wonder why the old sheriff stopped showing up to the schoolhouse hearings? Why he never opened the basement? That's got nothing to do with me." "But you still smell like him." The color drained from his face. "You know what that smell is?" she asked. He didn't answer. "It's mold, and chalk, and basement prayers." The widow moved between them. "She's not resisting." "I didn't say she was." "Then why are your fingers on the radio?" The sheriff blinked. He hadn't realized he was reaching. He pulled his hand back slow. "You can come with me," he said, addressing the girl now. "Or we can do this harder." The girl didn't flinch. "I've done harder." He looked back at his car, then at the crowd. People watched but didn't move. Nobody wanted to claim what they saw. Not yet. "Let's go," he said finally. The girl turned to the widow. "You'll take care of them?" The widow nodded. "I won't look away this time." The girl stepped forward. "I won't run." The sheriff's son reached for her arm, but she moved ahead before he touched her. He walked behind her, not beside. His hand hovered near his belt. She didn't resist. She just smiled, the kind of smile that came after remembering something too many times. She got into the truck on her own. He shut the door like it was done. But it wasn't. As he turned the key, the radio crackled. "Dispatch to Unit 7. He clicked it off. Drove slow past the crowd. People stepped aside. Not one made eye contact. The truck rolled over the bridge and out of sight. The The widow stood still long after they were gone. The boys leaned into her sides. "Is she gone forever?" one asked. The widow didn't answer. She watched the sky. The smoke was gone, but something still hung there. Not ash, not memory. Something waiting. The chamber smelled of varnish and fresh linen, like someone had tried to scrub the past out with polish and starch. They'd opened the windows before it began. Let the breeze in, as if air could protect them. The girl stood alone at the front. No shackles, no escort, just her night dress under a borrowed coat, buttoned wrong. Her hands were folded, still raw from the rope burns she never spoke of. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at the seal carved above the bench. She looked at the floor as if waiting for it to open again. There were no reporters, no transcripts, just a few councilmen, 3 mothers who refused to stay home, and men in suits too expensive for the town they governed. The sheriff's son leaned in the corner by the exit. One hand on the door, the other never left his hip. The chairman tapped the gavel once, not to silence anyone. There was no noise, just to begin. The girl raised her eyes. "My name isn't required," she said. Someone shifted in the pews. A throat cleared. She continued. "I remember the chapel schoolhouse had 19 desks. 16 had names carved beneath. Mine was carved into the underside of the seat, because we weren't allowed to speak. I spelled it wrong the first time." The chairman opened his mouth, closed it again. "I remember the quiet room had 2 ropes, one for wrists, one for ankles. They changed them weekly. The second sheriff, not the first, the second, ordered the bleach after the girl in the red dress bled through her bindings." A sharp breath from the back row. She didn't pause. "I remember the bishop had a mole on his chin. He never touched it, but his brother did. Every time he lied." The youngest judge shifted in his chair. His knuckles turned white around his pen. "I remember the sound the shovel made when it hit bone. It's different than rock. Bone sings." A mother in the front row began to cry. Quiet, into her palm. The sheriff stepped forward. The chairman held up a hand. The girl looked at no one in particular. Her voice never rose. "I remember Lila before she was Lila. I remember the badge before it was passed down. I remember the names on the letters that were never mailed. I remember the girls who were told not to remember." Another pause. Silence swelled. "I remember the buyers." Her eyes lifted then. Not wide, not wild, just steady. They came to the chapel wearing boots they wiped before entering. Some smelled like wood smoke, some like copper. They brought bread, coins, promises. She turned to the back of the room. 4 men sat together, all graying, all in good health. None of them smiled. She pointed to the second one from the left. "He called me Mouse." To the third, "He touched the cross on his neck before choosing." To the fourth, "He said I'd be safer with him than starving." To the first, "He never said anything, just wrote a number on a card." The council sat still. No one moved. The sheriff pushed off the wall. "Is this accusation?" The girl looked at him. "This is remembering." He looked to the judges. "She's just a child." The girl smiled, just slightly. "I've been a child too many times." The sheriff turned, opened the door, walked out without another word. One of the mothers stood. Her voice cracked. "Who kept the records?" The girl didn't answer. Another asked, "Where are the others?" She shook her head. Some underground, some in basements, some standing behind their mothers right now, watching to see what happens. The youngest judge looked ready to speak. The chairman beat him to it. "This isn't a trial." "No," the girl said. "It never was." "Then why are you here?" "To see who wouldn't look away this time." Nobody spoke. The gavel didn't fall. There was no verdict, only the sound of the girl's shoes as she walked out, step by step, like she'd memorized the weight of every board on that floor, like she'd carried their sound in her bones. The widow came back on foot. No horse, no wagon, no company. Just the same boots she'd worn for 2 winters too long and a bag of nothing but a canteen and thread. The town didn't stop her. They didn't watch her pass. They pretended not to see. Like they always had. The road had changed. Not in shape, not in distance, just in silence. The way it held sound. The way the wind slowed near the edges, like it was trying to remember how to breathe again. When she reached the edge of her land, she saw the outline before she saw the house, or what was left of it. The chimney stood like a soldier. The windows were black pits. The porch beams had collapsed inward, charred to the bone. But the center of the house, the floor, hadn't burned all the way through. It hadn't collapsed. It hadn't even cracked. It just scorched. A perfect black rectangle where the trapdoor used to be. She stood at the edge of it now, boots sinking into ash, staring down at the floor that should have been gone. The boards were smooth, no splintering, just dark, rippled wood that still steamed when the wind hit it just right. She dropped her bag. The girl was gone. The boys, too. She hadn't asked where. No one told her. No one needed to. She'd heard whispers in town, seen the looks. Some said the girl had been taken by the state. Others claimed they saw her walking into the woods barefoot, not looking back. One boy said he saw her step into a puddle and vanish without a sound, but none of them saw what the widow saw now. She knelt at the rectangle, ran her fingers across the smooth char, still warm, still breathing. The song came faint, so faint she thought she imagined it at first. A humming, no words, just sound. High, soft, familiar. The melody they used to sing at the schoolhouse, before mealtime, before surrender. The song they gave the girls to hum so they wouldn't cry when the lights went out. The widow sat down, removed her boots. Let her bare feet press against the scorched floor. The hum didn't stop. She closed her eyes. "I know what I did," she whispered. The earth didn't answer, but the hum deepened, like someone had picked up the tune and carried it further down. She lay back, arms at her sides, the way they used to place the children before chapel. The wind carried dust across her chest. Her breath slowed. Her name didn't come to her. Not Lila, not Mrs. Callahan, nothing. She wasn't her name anymore. She was what she remembered. She was what she forgot. She was what she chose to listen to now. The ash didn't cling to her clothes. It welcomed her. She pressed her palms flat against the ground. This time, she whispered, "I won't look away." The hum rose beneath her, not louder, just closer, as if it had always been waiting for someone to stay still long enough to hear it finish the song.